Hi, I'm Ava.
They always said weddings were about love, about union, about family. I used to believe that once, at least, before I walked into the grand Marigold Estate ballroom in my navy blue dress, silent, uninvited, and unseen. Before I sat in the last row with no name card, no welcome glance, and no one asking why I wasn't at the head table. That moment was not the beginning. That was the conclusion of something much older, something colder. A slow unraveling of years where I had always been present, always useful, but never remembered. And yet, on that day, I didn't come to be remembered. I came to make sure they never forgot. The irony was, I had helped plan the wedding. Quietly, behind the emails and vendor bookings, under my company name. While they toasted to centerpieces and posed for food tastings, I drafted timelines and revised seating charts at midnight. They sent out save the dates, without ever saving me a place. And I only realized that the day before the wedding, when I called the venue for a last-minute update and the coordinator asked a question that made my stomach drop. Will you be needing a +1 for your seat at the family table? I paused. There's no seat listed under my name, I had said slowly. Maybe you made a mistake. But the woman's voice didn't waver. I don't see you on the list at all. Are you sure you're attending as a guest? My name not there. Again. I didn't cry.
Not then.
Instead, I scrolled through the old messages from my mother, the polite ones with lines like, "Thank you for helping so much, honey," and "You're the detailed genius we need." No warmth, just delegation masked as gratitude. I remembered the long calls with my cousin Hannah, the bride, where she asked me to find a better band, redo the floral budget, and settle the last-minute mess with the bridal suite. "You just get it, Ava," she said once, "and you always come through." She never said I'd be there. Not even after I wired the deposit for the custom aisle runner when hers bounced, not after I made my own designer give up her weekend to finish alterations on her second dress. I thought I was doing what family did. What I didn't know was that they'd stopped thinking of me as family a long time ago. The next morning, I didn't text anyone. I didn't call. I didn't confront. I printed a fresh itinerary from the vendor portal I managed, highlighted the parts that still bore my initials in the file path, and slid it into my clutch. Just in case I forgot who really pulled the strings. I wasn't going to ruin anything. I wasn't even going to raise my voice. But I was going to attend that wedding. Not as a victim. Not as a ghost. As a silent partner in a story they wrote over me. I arrived 15 minutes before the ceremony. The valet didn't recognize me. I handed him my keys without a smile. He took them with a nod, looked over my shoulder as if someone more important might be arriving next. The entrance to the ballroom was glowing with candlelight and artificial joy. Gold runners lined the corridor, scattered with white petals and a sign that read, "Welcome to the union of Hannah and Tyler, 2 souls, 1 heart." A heart I had helped design, engraved, and shipped from Italy when the original sign vendor canceled. I knew because I had placed the rush order. Inside, the space looked like a magazine spread. Everything was perfectly symmetrical. Crystal goblets shimmered against ivory linens. Orchids twisted out of tall centerpieces. The DJ booth I had sourced from a contact in LA stood at the back, discreet and powerful. It was objectively stunning. And yet I felt nothing.
No pride. No.
Just a chill of something close to detachment. The kind you get when you walk into a room you used to dream about and realize you were never part of the dream. I moved through the guests like mist, light enough not to be noticed, but solid enough to leave shadows. My family was there, of course. Mother in lavender chiffon, chatting with her wine glass tilted just enough to seem elegant. My younger sister, Elise, beaming as she adjusted the pearl pins in Hannah's veil. No one turned to me. Not even when I brushed past Uncle Greg, who had once said I was the anchor of the family. Anchors, apparently, don't belong at the surface. I sat in the back, not because I wanted to, but because there was nowhere else to go. Each seat had a name card, a floral tie, a printed menu, except the last row. That row had extras, placeholders. A silent shrug from a host to say, "If someone we didn't plan for shows up, they can sit here." I didn't fume. I didn't tremble. I just sat, hands folded over my lap, watching Hannah glide down the aisle in the gown I helped salvage after a fitting disaster. Watching Tyler, the groom, smiling nervously. The same man who once told me I was the calm in Hannah's chaos. I had no idea how literal that would become. The vows began. Predictable, tender, well-rehearsed. Guests dabbed at tears. I didn't. I watched Hannah say things like, "I've never known peace until you." And I thought of the email she once sent me at 2:37 a.m., full of panic and misspellings, begging me to fix the travel situation for her out-of-town guests. I thought of how I fixed it, without sleep, without thanks. That was the last favor I did. After that, I stopped offering. But by then, the wedding was built. They just didn't see the scaffolding. The reception was worse. Not because of what was said, but because of what wasn't. I moved to the cocktail area for air, only to hear my name in passing, twice. Didn't Ava used to do events or something? One guest asked, sipping champagne I had handpicked from a short list of 10. She's probably off somewhere busy again, said another. I was 5 feet away. Neither turned. That's when I realized they hadn't erased me out of spite. They had simply written their story so tightly around themselves that there was no room left for anyone else. I slipped back inside during the dinner hour, hoping to leave early, but something made me stop at the entrance to the staff hallway. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was habit. But I turned and walked down the corridor, past the kitchen hum, until I found the vendor coordinator standing with her clipboard, flustered. She looked up. "Are you Ava?" she asked. I nodded. The groom's a little panicked. Something about the playlist. He says you'd know what's wrong. Of course he did. In a quiet room near the bar, Tyler was pacing, whispering into his phone, then saw me and looked as though someone had tossed him a lifeline. "It won't load," he said, holding out the iPad. "The playlist won't play. It's locked or something." I took the device without a word, typed in the passcode, the one I had set myself 6 weeks ago, and unlocked it. The music cue populated immediately. He exhaled. "I knew you'd know," he said. I handed it back. "You're welcome," I said, for the first time that night. He nodded, grateful, but already distracted. They always were. I didn't return to the ballroom. Instead, I found a seat in the vendor lounge, dimly lit, half empty, where the photographer sat reviewing her shots. She glanced at me, then back at her screen. "You're the planner, right?" she asked. I shook my head. Just someone they forgot to include. She tilted her head, puzzled, but didn't ask more. And that was fine. I didn't want to explain. I just needed a minute.
A breath.
A reminder that I wasn't crazy, that I had done all those things, that I mattered, even if they chose not to see it. When I finally left, the party was in full swing. Glasses clinked, lights twinkled, and someone shouted about cake. No one noticed me slip out. I drove home in silence, my hands steady, my chest hollow but calm. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just opened my email, clicked on the shared wedding vendor folder, and revoked all access. Then I archived it. They would call me dramatic if they ever found out. They'd say I took it too personally. But the truth was, it wasn't about a seat. It was about a pattern. A lifetime of showing up and being left out. A lifetime of being the builder, never the guest. And this time, they had done it in a ballroom full of people.
Publicly.
Elegantly. Without shame. But this time, I had a plan. 2 days after the wedding, I received a delivery. A cream-colored envelope tucked inside a pale pink box, sealed with a gold sticker that read, "With love, Hannah and Tyler." For a moment, I thought maybe it was a thank you note. Maybe they'd noticed. Maybe they had asked the caterer or the coordinator, who actually fixed everything. I let myself hope for 5 seconds. Then I opened the box. Inside was a card with a picture of them laughing under a canopy of lights, her dress glowing, his tie crooked with charm. The message was printed. "Thank you for being a part of our special day. We are grateful for your support, encouragement, and love." My name wasn't written anywhere. Not even once. It was a mass print note. I flipped the card, searching for handwriting. Nothing. It might as well have come from a stranger. I didn't get angry. I got cold. The kind of cold that sits in your lungs, patient and clear. I placed the card back inside the box and slid it into the bottom drawer of my kitchen cabinet, right next to the contracts. Because what they didn't know, what they never bothered to ask, was that my name wasn't just on the vendor contacts and the playlist. It was on the business license that handled the rentals. It was on the corporate account used to secure the lighting setup. It was the name that signed the final invoice for the estate's venue deposit. They used me. Again. But this time, I had receipts. Literal and legal ones. It started subtly. A flagged payment from the photo booth vendor came through to my work email. Payment declined. I let it sit. A day later, I got a notice from the calligraphy artist asking if the couple still wanted the hand-painted thank you scrolls. Apparently, the balance was unpaid. She included the message Hannah sent her. Just invoice Ava. She's handling it. That was when the tightness in my chest cracked into something sharper. She had passed it off again, even after the wedding. Even now. I replied simply, please direct all future billing to the bride. My involvement has concluded. A minute later, I got a text from Elise. Hey, did you forget to pay the photo booth lady? Hannah's freaking out. Says it's your job. No, how are you? Just panic because the illusion was cracking.
I didn't respond.
I forwarded the email trail to my own archive folder. I knew what was coming next. The narrative would shift, quietly, then publicly. I'd go from the one who saved the day to the one who dropped the ball. But I was ready. I spent that evening downloading every document from my client portal and organizing it under a new folder. Personal use, family wedding. Every contract, email, proof of payment, and delivery confirmation. I didn't plan to weaponize it. Not yet. But I needed to be ready. Because when they turn on you, they always pretend it was your fault. The twist came later that week when Tyler showed up. I was in my studio, adjusting the color palette for a new cafe renovation, when the bell rang. I thought it was a delivery, maybe fabric samples. But when I opened the door, he was standing there in jeans and a blazer, holding a wrapped bouquet that looked like it had been picked up last minute at a gas station. I didn't invite him in. He said he just wanted to thank me, that he had no idea how much I'd done. That Hannah had always made it sound like I was just helping with a few emails. He looked genuinely confused. Or maybe guilty. I didn't say anything for a while. Then I asked him the one question that had been stuck in my throat since the night I sat in the back row. Did you know I wasn't on the seating chart? He hesitated, eyes flicking down. I thought you were sitting with vendors. I smiled without humor. Vendors. After everything. He said something about not wanting to interfere in family dynamics. About how he trusted Hannah's word on who to include and assumed I wanted to stay behind the scenes. I asked him if he thought people who wanted to stay behind the scenes usually paid $14,000 in vendor deposits. His silence answered that. Before he left, he asked if I wanted to grab coffee sometime, maybe clear the air. I told him I was busy. He didn't argue. 2 days later, the narrative changed online. Subtle, but intentional. A post from Hannah. A picture of her bouquet with a caption that read, "Planning this wedding without a coordinator nearly killed me, but we did it." I stared at the caption for a long time. I hadn't expected a public thank you. But I didn't expect public erasure either. The comments rolled in. You're a rock star? Can't believe you pulled this off yourself. Gorgeous and talented, Elise commented. No one saw the sleepless nights you went through. Babe, you did everything. I didn't comment. I didn't message. I just screenshot the post and filed it away. Then the final twist. I got a call from my accountant. A discrepancy had shown up in my quarterly business report. A flagged transaction. One of the vendors I'd paid under my business account hadn't been properly coded as reimbursed. The expense sat on my books like a bleeding wound. I'd forgotten to request repayment from Hannah. Not because I didn't want to. Because I had assumed, like a fool, that she'd take care of it. The amount? $5,860. I stared at the invoice, then at the bank statement, then at the string of messages between us that ended the moment the wedding did. The messages that said things like, "Can you just," and "Let me know when it's paid," and "You're amazing. Couldn't do this without you." Not a single one that said, "I'll pay you back." I drafted an email. I attached the invoice. I added the subject line, "Outstanding balance. Urgent." Then I stared at it. I knew what would happen the moment I hit send. She'd deny. She'd delay. She'd spin the story. They always do. Instead, I closed the laptop. The next morning, I sent a different email. Not to Hannah. To the estate manager of Marigold Estate. I requested a formal vendor credit for Birch and Mason Interiors for our contribution to the decor and execution, based on documented project files. I CC'd my legal advisor. I attached files, dated and tagged. The manager replied within 4 hours. She apologized for the oversight. Said the estate would list Birch and Mason as a co-design vendor for the spring season catalog and provide portfolio access to the images from the event. I said thank you. And that was all. The next day, Elise called. I let it go to voicemail. Her voice trembled, pretending softness. "Ava, can you call me back? I think Hannah's a little upset about something you did. She said the estate emailed her about you being listed as a design partner. She's saying it looks weird, that it wasn't your wedding." She paused. Then quieter. "But, I get it. You kinda did everything." I didn't call back. Later that evening, I received a final envelope. This time, a formal letter, typed, not handwritten, signed by Hannah and Tyler. It asked me, in firm but polite language, to reconsider any public association with the wedding to avoid confusion. They said it would be deeply appreciated if I removed any references from my portfolio or website. They used words like disruption, brand, and privacy. No mention of the money. No mention of the work. I placed the letter on my desk, turned off the lamp, and let the silence fill the room. I wasn't angry. I was done. And sometimes that's louder. A week passed before I heard from anyone again. It was quiet in the kind of way that felt intentional. The kind of silence that doesn't happen by accident, but is arranged, polished, purposeful, waiting to explode. Then, a ping. A notification from a shared industry group on social media. One of my colleagues had tagged me in a story post. "Shout out to @Birch and Mason for the design inspiration behind this aisle setup. Saw your layout in the Marigold Estate preview and had to borrow a few details."
Clean.
Timeless. Brilliant. I stared at the story, then followed the link to Marigold's online feature. The Spring Wedding Showcase. Front and center was Hannah's wedding, styled and credited in bold. Design collaboration, Birch and Mason Interiors. There it was. My work. My name. Finally. And I hadn't said a word. I didn't need to. That afternoon, I received a flurry of texts. First from Elise. "Did you tell the estate to credit you?" Hannah is livid. She says it looks like you're hijacking her wedding for marketing. I told her to chill, but she's saying it's embarrassing. Then from Hannah herself. "I don't understand what you're trying to do here.
We thanked you.
You were just helping. Why are you making this into some professional thing?" I didn't respond. I didn't need to justify what was already true. She used my services, my company name, my resources. The estate simply gave credit where it was due. But the real twist came the next morning. I had just opened my studio when a woman walked in, confident and elegant, with a tablet in her hand. She introduced herself as a senior editor from a regional wedding magazine. "I saw your name listed in the Marigold catalog," she said, eyes scanning the showroom. "We're putting together a piece on modern event designers. Would you be interested in being featured?" I said yes, without hesitation. And I didn't mention the bride's name. Later that evening, as I worked on the draft submission, I got another message. This time from my aunt, a woman I hadn't spoken to in months. She sent a link to a Facebook thread. A long, spiraling conversation where Hannah had posted a cropped photo of the wedding with a caption that read, "When people try to take credit for your memories, protect your peace." Dozens of supportive comments followed. People I knew, people who had eaten at that wedding, sat at the tables I arranged, toasted under chandeliers I had selected. The comments were laced with phrases like jealousy is loud and some people just don't know how to let go. I didn't reply. I just saved the thread quietly. Because when you speak the truth later, they always pretend they forgot the lies. But things didn't stop there. A few days later, I received a formal email from Hannah's legal rep. The message was short but sharp. It claimed that my use of wedding images or design elements from their event without explicit permission violated their privacy and intellectual property rights. They requested immediate removal of all content from my portfolio and hinted at legal escalation if I didn't comply. It would have rattled me months ago.
But not now.
Because I had everything documented. Signed vendor agreements under my business license. Email chains where Hannah confirmed I could handle design selections. Screenshots where she called it a business favor. There was even a voice memo she once left, thanking me and joking, "We should probably call you our secret wedding planner." I forwarded it all to my attorney with a single line. Let's make sure they remember the full story. 2 days later, her lawyer backed off. Their tone softened. The threat turned into a misunderstanding. A draft apology was proposed, not public, just private, just enough to clear the smoke without taking any blame. I declined it. Because some things don't deserve closure. Some things just deserve exposure. The storm Hannah tried to stir up didn't land where she expected. Instead, the magazine article came out the next week. A 2-page spread. Reclaiming the narrative. The women behind the magic. There was my face, my studio, and a highlighted paragraph describing how some designers don't just build beauty, they rebuild their own boundaries through it. I received more inquiries that week than I had in the last 3 months combined. Then one morning Elise showed up. Not a call. Not a text. She just stood outside my building in her usual effortless smile, like everything wasn't cracked between us. I stepped outside, unsure why she was here, but too curious to ignore it. She handed me a small, white envelope. Inside was a handwritten note in Hannah's handwriting. It wasn't an apology. It was a warning. Just know that if you keep pushing this, it won't end well. I'm trying to move on. You should too. There was no sorry.
No accountability.
Just a threat covered in cursive. Elise watched my face, unsure whether I'd break or burn. I didn't do either. I just said, "You're delivering messages now?" She looked down, suddenly uncomfortable. "I didn't agree with how things were handled," she said. "But I didn't know you'd take it this far." "I didn't," I said. "They did. I just stopped letting them write the ending." She didn't respond. A week later, I got a message request from Tyler. It had been silent between us since the day he came to my studio. This time, his words were careful. I didn't realize what was happening behind the scenes. "I'm sorry if I let it happen. I hope you're okay." I didn't answer. Because it wasn't about being okay. It was about being finally done. But fate wasn't quite done with me. 1 month after the wedding, I received a message from the Marigold estate team. They had been so impressed with my work, documented or not, that they wanted to bring me on as a consulting designer for future events. Not under someone else's name.
Mine.
I signed the contract the next morning. Then I archived everything. All the screenshots, the voicemails, the social posts. I kept them. Not to use, but to remember. Because people like Hannah will always try to rewrite history. They will always gather their audience before your side is even finished forming sentences. But this time, I didn't need the stage. I had the spotlight elsewhere. A new client. A fresh venue. A room where my name would never be missing. And I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even waiting for an apology. I had stepped out of the old narrative. And I wasn't looking back. 2 months after the wedding, my name was on a new kind of invitation. Not printed in gold on a card I didn't receive, but displayed boldly on a website redesign launch. Ava Hale, Creative Director, Birch and Mason Interiors. The same week, I finalized a design contract with a high-profile corporate event group. 3 more inquiries arrived before Friday. None of them asked who I knew. They only asked what I could build. It was a strange kind of peace, being seen not because I fought for it, but because I stopped hiding behind people who never meant to protect me. I had built them a wedding. They gave me silence. I built myself a name, and the world had started listening. Still, silence has its own ways of echoing. Elise called again. I didn't pick up, but she left a voicemail this time. Not guilt, not warning. Something else. I don't think Mom knows what really happened, she said. She just keeps saying you're overreacting. That you've always been so sensitive. She paused, then added. She doesn't know about the money, or the legal letter, or the name being left off. Just thought you should know.
I sat with that for a while.
Sensitive. As if I were a balloon, easily popped. As if being cut out was a matter of personal fragility, not repeated betrayal. My mother hadn't called once. Not after the wedding. Not after the article. Not even when she must have heard whispers through Elise or others. It wasn't anger. It was convenience. She didn't reach out because doing so would require facing something she had long decided was too uncomfortable. Me, asking to be seen. Then 3 nights later it happened. I was standing at my kitchen counter, arranging samples for a new gallery client, when an email arrived from my mother's address. No subject. No greeting. Just a forwarded message. A digital receipt from the car dealership. The same Lexus I'd quietly purchased for her after her engine gave out last winter. The message thread showed she had forwarded the car papers to Hannah, adding, Hannah dear, this was the invoice Ava took care of.
Keep it just in case.
She might try to use it later. I didn't breathe for a full minute, not because I was shocked, but because it confirmed something that had always lived in the background of our family dynamic like soft static. I was not a daughter to her. I was a service, an extra account line, a card swipe, a placeholder for responsibility when no one else stepped up. And now she feared I'd use it, not cherish it, not recall it as a moment of care, but weaponize it like she would have if the roles were reversed. That night, I opened a photo album I hadn't touched in years. Buried in the middle were pictures of birthdays, school plays, Christmas mornings. In most of them, I wasn't the one unwrapping gifts. I was the one behind the camera, or placing the cake, or tidying the background. There was a photo from Elise's 16th birthday, Mom and Elise laughing with sparklers, Hannah holding a champagne flute. I was standing at the edge of the frame, holding a garbage bag, smiling anyway. That was always the role. The smiling assistant. I closed the album and pulled out a notebook. At the top of a blank page, I wrote one line. You're not cruel for stepping back from people who never held space for you. Then I circled it. The next morning, I posted the sentence to my business Instagram with no context. Just a caption, for the ones who give and give until there's nothing left to carry but the silence. The post got more traction than I expected. Comments poured in from strangers, clients, followers I'd never met. Some wrote, "This hit me harder than I thought." Others just typed, "One." One woman messaged privately saying, "Thank you. I needed to hear this more than I can say." That was the thing. It was never just about my family. It was about the blueprint so many women are handed, the unspoken job of being the quiet backbone, the problem solver, the invisible hero, the one who absorbs the hard edges so no one else has to feel discomfort, until you disappear altogether. And still, the real twist hadn't come yet. It came during a client meeting 3 weeks later. I was finalizing an event layout when the client asked, "Would you mind if I used your name as a referral for another bride I know? She's related to Hannah Kane, I think." I didn't flinch. "Of course," I said. That evening, I received a direct message from the bride-to-be, a cousin of Tyler's. Polite, excited, full of admiration. She said she'd heard how I basically saved the Kane wedding and asked if I'd be willing to help her elopement-style vineyard ceremony. I said I'd think about it. Then she added something that stilled me. "Hannah said she wouldn't have survived the planning without you. But she also said you had a falling out? Something about you being upset you weren't more involved." I reread it twice. That was the story now. Not that I built the foundation. Not that I funded the vendors. But that I was upset I wasn't more involved. That it was all about a seat, a cake, a table. I didn't reply to the bride immediately. Instead, I wrote something in my notebook, They rewrite the story to protect the version of you they're comfortable with. The quiet helper, the side note, the drama. And then I made a decision. Not revenge. Not confrontation. Something far quieter. I called the estate. I asked if they would allow me to host a private design showcase on the property grounds. A small one. Just a portfolio preview event. My name. My clients. My work. They said yes. That following week, I sent out the invites. Not to family. Not to anyone from that circle. Just to vendors I loved working with, industry contacts, and clients who had seen my value long before the headlines.
No speeches. No fanfare.
Just proof. Proof of what I could create when no one was erasing me from the guest list. As I stood in the garden that evening, watching people admire the floral installations and comment on the lighting details, I realized something I hadn't felt fully until that moment. I had never wanted a spotlight. I just wanted room to breathe. And now I had built it myself. The showcase was over. The lights were dimmed, the guests had left, and the last of the lanterns floated above the stone path, flickering quietly in the evening wind. I stood by the garden arch, my hands loose at my sides, eyes on the lavender bushes that lined the edge of the estate. They had bloomed late this year.
Fitting.
Some things bloom later than expected, and still manage to fill the entire space with fragrance. When I got home that night, I didn't open my laptop. I didn't check the mentions or the tagged posts. I didn't scroll through the congratulatory texts that had begun to trickle in from vendors and designers. Instead, I walked into my bedroom, peeled off the dress I'd worn for the event, and stood barefoot in the silence. I looked at myself in the mirror for a long time, not searching for flaws or changes or signs of tiredness. Just seeing myself fully, without anyone else's gaze shaping what I meant. And then I deleted the wedding folder. All the screenshots, the voicemails, the emails, the seatless guest list, the invoice logs, the audio files, all of it. Not because I forgave them, not because I was ready to forget, but because I no longer needed proof for a story I had already finished writing. The next morning, Elise texted, "I saw your event on Marigold's page. Looked beautiful." Then she added, "Mom said she wants to reach out. Says she didn't realize how badly things went." I stared at the message for a long time. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. Then I typed, "That's nice," and hit send. I didn't need to open that door. And still, a few days later, it came anyway. A call. A no number, but I knew. My mother's voice hadn't changed. She started with pleasantries, told me she saw the article, the showcase, even the new logo. She said it looked very polished. I let her speak. She danced around the subject for a while, then finally said it. "I think things got out of hand." That was her version of accountability. She said she didn't realize I had felt so left out.
That I should have said something.
That families have misunderstandings. Then she said something I'll never forget. "You've always been stronger than the rest of us. That's why we lean on you." I closed my eyes, letting the weight of those words pass over me. I didn't argue. I didn't offer comfort. Because that was the story they always told. You're stronger. So carry more. You're smarter. So fix it. You're not emotional. So you won't mind. It was the script they wrote for me before I could even read one. She asked if I wanted to come over for dinner next week. She said Hannah might be there too. That it could be nice to reset. I told her gently, "I'm not available for that." She went quiet. Then she asked, "So, that's it? You're done with us?" I said no, not done. Just done doing it the way that cost me myself. She hung up before saying goodbye. That weekend I booked a trip. Not to Paris. Not to Italy. Not to a place that held old weight. A quiet cabin on the edge of a mountain lake. Still water, clean air, no reception. The morning I left, I placed my phone inside a drawer. I left it behind on purpose. I brought only a journal, a pen, a bag with 3 outfits, and a camera I hadn't used since college. On the second night, I took a photo of the lake just before the sun dipped beneath the trees. The sky was a soft bruise of orange and navy. The water reflected it back like it understood. That night, I wrote a letter. Not to anyone else. Just to myself. I wrote, "You were never hard to love. You were just easier to use." Then I turned the page and wrote another line. "And now that they can't, they don't know what to do with your absence." It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was peace. Earned, not given. On the last day of the trip, I took a walk into the woods and found a small clearing where wildflowers grew in a crooked circle. I sat down in the middle and closed my eyes.
No timeline. No deadlines. No titles.
Just Ava. Not the sister. Not the fixer. Not the backup bride. Just a woman who finally chose herself. When I returned to the city, the pace resumed. Projects picked up. New clients emerged. I received an email from a national brand inviting me to speak on a panel about modern design leadership. The invite was short, but the last line made me pause. "We'd love for you to share your journey, especially how you reclaimed your voice." I accepted. On the night of the event, just as I was about to go on stage, my assistant whispered that someone had left a package for me at the front desk. I asked her to bring it to the green room. Inside was a small envelope. No note, just a seat card from the wedding, printed in the same gold cursive. But this time, it had my name on it. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't redemption. It was just a card.
Late.
Uninvited. An afterthought. I set it gently on the table beside me, stood up, and walked toward the stage. The lights were warm, the room full, and the air buzzed with the kind of attention I used to give away without expecting it back. I didn't speak as someone scorned. I spoke as someone rebuilt. I talked about design. I talked about boundaries. I talked about what happens when women stop apologizing for taking up space. And when I finished, the room stood. Not because of what I had lost, but because of what I had chosen. Later that night, alone in my studio, I took the seat card out of my bag. I didn't shred it. I didn't frame it. I tucked it inside the same notebook where I had once written, "You're not cruel for stepping back from people who never held space for you." And then, on the last page, I wrote, "They didn't save me a seat at the wedding, so I built the table. And I placed it where no one could take it from me again. Not this time. Not ever."